Hi, folks. We are back. This is the real kickoff. Of course, Jamie and Joe show did that at 9, but the first speaker today to lead the pack is none other than Dr. Tracey Stroup. The infamous Dr. Tracey Stroup in some circles. And you think she's infamous now and she stirred things up? You ain't seen nothing yet because it's coming. And we're going to talk about it and the effect that Dr. Tracey has had over the years and the big impact she's going to have on Make America Healthy Again. So that's a lot to do. Doc, how you doing?
I'm good. Well, thanks for having me back. I always love to be here. And Joe, I miss our old radio show days when we used to just get on 5 minutes before and be like, what are we talking about? It seems like that's what we're doing here. But we always had something to say. There was never a lack of words from us. So
no, never.
I'm excited to be here. And I'm glad you guys are still doing this at World of Wellness because as we can see, the world's finally waking up. So hopefully this will now sink in, right?
Finally waking up. Isn't that the truth, though? I mean, look what it took to do this. I mean, look at the people and the power behind, health that we're finally seeing come to light. So, I mean, it is going to be exciting. So, you've been doing this your whole career. We've been doing we were health freedom fighters from day one. And, but, this new opportunity that has come your way. We've got to kick off with this because this is amazing. When I saw that, I remembered when I first saw your post on this nomination, it took me way back to when we first met Dr. Judy Mikovits and how you met her through a prayer group, right?
Yeah, actually.
Originally.
Yes. So, she was in my prayer group that Sherry Tenpenny had put together.
Okay.
With women. But I met her at the Clay Clark event. And he was doing an event during the pandemic where he was just giving people a voice on stage in front of live audiences and collectively getting people together to learn, like, how can we stay healthy without doing those stupid things like following arrows. And I knew who she was through Dr. Sherry. So Dr. Sherry was speaking at the event and Judy was speaking. And I remember watching her do her lecture and sitting in the audience thinking, I know what she's trying to say. So I walked up to her afterwards and I said, I want to tell you two things. I was like, one, I was like, speak hope. I was like, because there's just way too much fear mongering. There was just, it was just a bunch of like, this is going to kill you or this is going to kill you. And I was like, people just need someone to get up there and be like, it's going to be okay. And here's what we do. Right. And then second, I was like, I can put protocols to your PowerPoint. And so she gave me her PowerPoint and I sat down and I went through it and I put together NF formulations to her PowerPoint. And I created an online store for her with the Get Healthy software. And we put QR codes up and people actually ordered the protocols. And that's how she got introduced to NF.
Yeah.
And then after that, we just started talking. And the thing that I'll say about Dr. Judy is she's always open to learn. I mean, I will give her credit there. I mean, she really wanted to know, she was a scientist. And so she was behind the microscope all those years. And now she's like out front and like almost forced to be a clinician. And that wasn't her background. So she was like, I need to learn this so that I can be a better scientist and I can help people, because she really wanted to correct everything that had happened.
Yeah.
So we started to go back and forth on NF formulas, and I introduced her to Nutritional Frontiers. And I know that we've done events together. We were at WOW together. And the very first product I put in front of her was DMG, dimethylglycine.
Yes.
She was like, oh my gosh, she knew Dr. Kendall. She knew his work. I mean, it just, like the light bulb started to click of like everything that she had studied in the past and had written about as a scientist with other scientists was now coming to the forefront, like all that research, all that work. So that's kind of how we got connected. And then we started doing classes together. And
wasn't that also the initial connection with Bobby?
Yeah. Well, he was not at those events, but Dr. Judy and Dr. Sherry have always been close with him. And I think
Okay.
especially Dr. Sherry.
Yeah.
So, personally, I mean, I can't say that, Robert Kennedy Jr. is a personal friend of mine, but he was in the same circles that I was in with other people that were influential at that time. And I
Right.
know Dr. Sherry was close with him.
Hmm.
So that um, led to me understanding how passionate he was. And of course, the Children's Health Defense has been around a long time that he had
Yes.
started. He has
Yes.
had his own health issues. He's so educated on research,
Yes.
and that's the whole thing. Everyone's like, well, he's not a doctor. I'm like, but you don't have to be to read a 19-page
Yeah, I
research
know.
article. You don't have to be to read the inserts of a vaccine insert. The MAHA, the Make America Healthy Again, is built on the backs of mothers and fathers who would not accept being silenced, pushed away, or not accept having questions about what they were injecting into their children and
Hmm.
into their own bodies. It's built on the back of a grassroots movement where people are like, enough. What you're telling us and what is actually true is different. And
Yeah.
we are not going to accept that. It was built on the back of the American people who wanted better for their kids and knew that filling them full of processed foods, chemicals, dyes, pesticides, and herbicides was not the route to health. And injecting them with disease excipients and adjuvants and cross viral DNA from other animals was not the route of good
Yes.
health.
Right.
So that's where this movement came from. It was the last 30 years, Joe, of you and I, way back 6, 7 years ago, and Tuesdays with Tracey, when I used to do those little podcasts, and you would come
Yeah.
in and us talking about things like cholesterol, and it's not bad. And people were like, well, hold on a second, cholesterol's bad. And there was eat eggs, don't eat eggs, and such confusion. And us for the last 30 years, and Jamie and NF and our past, right now is the time where people are actually saying, oh, you guys weren't crazy. Well,
No.
I mean, we are crazy,
Wow.
but
In a good
in
way.
this regard, right? So that's what I think is kind of happening right now
Hmm.
is it has been all of this underlying, what would you say, the underground movement of
Yeah.
health and alternative health and
Yeah.
truth that we've always pushed away or poo-pooed. I was just talking about this on another podcast. Do you remember Quack Watch? Do you
Oh,
remember that?
yes. Yes.
Where's he now, Mr. Quackorama? He
Uh-huh.
would basically come out with practitioners that
Yeah.
were saying things like, "Oh, red light therapy is good, and what about, ice baths, and maybe we should look at ozone." And he would write he had an entire website dedicated to just destroying these people and
Hmm.
calling them quacks and all kinds of stuff because it didn't have FDA valid science behind it. I
Mm.
mean,
Well,
that's what I'm talking. That's how far we've come.
I know. Well, I mean, let's look at that. What's going to happen? Hopefully, I mean, you've got if Bobby gets confirmed, which he will, as head of Health and Human Services, that oversees the FDA.
Right.
I mean, my God, this is one of the most incredible things to happen in our industry since I think we've been in it. Now,
Yeah.
I remember back when I first learned about Bobby Kennedy was in 2018 when he won his very first lawsuit against the federal government.
Mhm.
And, no news channel in this country carried that story.
Yeah,
I got
I've
it.
never heard about. Yeah.
Yeah, I got it from a publication in Australia.
Mhm.
And it was that he sued the federal government for guess what? Fraud and
Right.
won.
For the
Because,
words
yeah,
safe and effective.
safe and effective. Exactly. These vaccines are safe and effective. Fraud because it was never proven. There was not a single study since 1986. We know that on any safety studies on any vaccine, and every manufacturer was indemnified. So he won that first lawsuit. And that's when I said, wait a minute. This is a Kennedy suing the federal government. This
Mhm.
is groundbreaking. And that was just the beginning.
It was, and it was unbelievable that that had no impact on anything.
Right.
Like
Because nobody knew about it.
nobody talked about it.
Yeah.
But you would think that something like that would then impact the Vaccine Safety Act, the 1986 Act, right?
Hopefully they'll get it repealed.
What's that?
Hopefully that'll get repealed.
Well, the three caveats that are in there when they put it into place was part of it. One of them was that there had to be safety tests on all vaccines every 2 years. And what Kennedy won was the fact that they never did those. They've
Yes.
never done those since 1986. So he was like, you can't say the words safe and effective because you've never proven that they're safe and effective. You've never done a safety study since the 1986 Act. And you would think that with that evidence at the Supreme Court level, they would have went back and have been like, you know what, because of this evidence, you have violated the criteria of the Vaccine Safety Act of 1986, and therefore it's null and void. But no, that didn't happen. You know why? Because there's more pharmaceutical lobbyists in Congress than all other lobbyists combined.
Right.
So it's just money, 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 and everybody's pockets are lined so that they get things through or they don't get their, they get off scot-free. That's what I'm hoping, because the FDA, all of these agencies that are supposed to protect us, they're all bought and paid for.
That's right.
We have seen recently, with the cereal industry and everybody's outside protesting Kellogg's. I'm like, you guys should be in DC protesting your congressmen who have allowed for the poisoning of your children, because they set the standards for the manufacturers like Kellogg's to use these ingredients, and they give criteria on what the safety levels are, but they first allow them into the country, right? The EPA, the FDA, we can look at all the agencies that are supposed to protect us, but they tell these manufacturers that it's okay for them to use it at this level or lower. So they know it's poison. They let the manufacturers, of course, they're going to choose it. They're a business. Kellogg's is not in the business of health. They're in the business of cereal production.
That's right.
Okay, so we can't look at them and be like, you should care about the health of our kids. They don't care.
No.
They're making cereal, yo. Who should care about your health are the agencies that are meant to protect you, and they have failed you. So take your picket signs and go outside the FDA building and picket them, because Kellogg's is going to do what the powers that be pass down and say, hey, this is safe. And they're like, oh, okay, so we can put this in our cereal. It's cheaper. We're a business. Our top line revenue is going to be great, and we're going to make a profit, and people are happy, and our cereal's colorful and pretty. They don't care. So everybody was raging about Kellogg's, and I'm like, you are screaming at the wrong people.
Yeah.
I get it. I don't like titanium oxide in my stuff either, or red 40. But Joe, how long have we been saying that?
Oh my
For the
God.
last 30 years, like, hey guys, you might want to consider that BHT is an explosive in your kid's cereal. And everyone's like, oh, ha, 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 ha. And all of a sudden, here we are with picket signs outside of a corporation that's making cereal. I'm glad it's happening, but it's higher up.
It's higher up. It's not going to go anywhere.
He's going to come in, and cut them off at the knees. He's not going to.
I just watched a podcast. I watched an interview. Did you see the interview that Tucker Carlson did with Mark Hyman?
Yes.
It was good. I thought it was really good. But one of the things he brought up was, Fruit Loops in Canada don't have red 40 or blue 6 or yellow, or they have food dyes in them. They use food.
Right. Yeah, they're using beetroot powder. They're using,
why?
preservative like that. You could use vitamin E versus BHT, but we just choose not to use that here because the agencies have allowed the manufacturers to use it.
Yes.
So here's the thing. Okay, somebody comes into the world of wellness, right, and says both of these things are exactly the same in safety. This one's $5,000 and this one's $1,000. Which one are you going to choose? Your business.
Sure.
If they're giving you the same data and you don't know because you're busy, what are you going to go check the data? You're going to read all the research articles? Nobody does that. So I'm not saying Kellogg's is off the hook, because now they're aware. They've been made aware.
Right.
They should make changes, but we should be mad at the agencies that your tax dollars pay to protect you that are allowing for the poisoning of your children. It's higher up. So that's why we need somebody like Bobby in there, in a committee in there that is really going to talk the truth. And as Mark Hyman was saying with Tucker Carlson, and the reason I like Tucker is at least he's open to hear.
Right.
Sometimes I'm like, hey, you're 20 years behind what we've been saying. But,
Yeah.
I mean, that's part of my frustration. I'm like, and my husband's always like, well, literally, my husband the other day was like, so fluoride, let's talk about that. I'm like, we've been married 16 years. Now you want to talk about fluoride? I was like, are you serious? I'm always like, filter the water, use the Berkey, make sure I've changed the water filter, like da 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 da, right? Even people in my own house, Joe.
I know, Tracy. I know. We all go through that. Yes. I've family members are the toughest ones to convince. We all know that.
Mhm.
But when someone, we talk about fluoride because we know it's a neurotoxin. We know that it causes your body to hold on to aluminum. Okay.
Yeah.
We know neurological diseases are on the rise. And if you hold on to aluminum, then you're going to further calcify your pineal gland. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. But, you got to remember, people say, I don't drink tap water. Okay. Do you go to a restaurant?
Yeah.
You have a
Never
cup of
drink water
coffee?
at a restaurant.
Yeah. They're
Yeah.
not filtering your water. You get ice cubes in in a glass of iced tea. You're getting fluoride no matter how you look at it.
Mhm.
Now, we can control some things like toothpaste. There's still people that don't realize that they should be using a fluoride-free toothpaste.
Right.
They just don't realize it.
Well, the interesting thing that my husband said was then he went back and he was like researching because he wanted to find out like how does fluoride really affect the brain. He came back out, he's like, I can't find anything on this. So I sent him to Children's Health Defense and I typed in fluoride in their search and it was like 27 articles on it. I was like, the problem is people don't know where to go.
Right.
And the places that do give free information about this stuff, they've been censored all these years.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what's going to change with this new administration, right, is more information is going to be out there. I think there's going to be a massive, like almost anxiety type effect on the world when this stuff comes out. Then there'll be like a cognitive dissonance where people are like, no, that can't be true. That just can't be true. Right.
Right.
And then there's going to be an awakening. But I don't think it's going to be immediate. And I also think with all of the things that he wants to do, which are great, there's going to be money in the way of big agencies that are going to fight against him.
Oh, yeah.
And he's not going to be able to just to sweep everything out and be like, oh, now we're doing all organic farming and now we're doing this and now we're doing, you can't, you'll collapse the economy. Like, it's going to be a slow progression. So I worry about the fact that when this new administration comes in, that the people sitting over here chomping at the bit saying, we can't wait till Bobby's in because it's down with the FDA and down with this. Like, that is not going to happen. It's not going to happen.
He has to be in stealth mode.
That's right. But it's going to be slow and steady, which wins the race.
Right.
And we have to have better marketing than they do. And
Oh
thus
my
far,
God.
we haven't. We haven't had the opportunity to get the word out and to propaganda people the way they have with the truth, although they're being propaganda with lies. So,
Well, Tracy, how many times have you heard me say the greatest marketing company in the world is the pharmaceutical industry?
about 10 billion. Yeah.
Yeah, because and here's why.
Mhm.
They market a product to a consumer that cannot buy it.
Mhm.
Think about that. Every pharmaceutical commercial you see, you cannot buy that product.
Yeah.
You have to go to a doctor. He has to prescribe it. That makes them the greatest marketing company in the world because they're still making billions of dollars by marketing something to someone who can't buy it.
Right. And people actually walk in and ask for it.
Yeah. So why do you need the doctor?
Right. Exactly. And then you lose your informed consent because you're asking for it.
Yes, you're asking for it.
So lots of things. So
Well, let's go to food then. I mean, let's stay on food for a few minutes because I know that's a big passion of yours and mine too. You've been, the one who has brought glyphosate to the forefront in our industry more than I think than anybody. And that journey started a while back. So give us a little bit on that.
Yeah, so I think probably Zach Bush is probably the first one that came out and talked about glyphosate. And basically that was when Monsanto was the owner of it. Now it's Bayer. They bought out Monsanto, or like I used to call them Monsatan. But, that came out of the Green Revolution, and the Green Revolution was brought forth, to end world hunger.
Yeah.
Although today we have more malnutrition and world hunger than ever. So what they did was they genetically modified rice to create golden rice. That was their first project. And that golden
Ah,
rice was genetically modified. So genetic modification, GMO, was initially used for some good things. Now they GMO everything for profit, but initially it was GMO to put more nutrition into a food. And
mhm.
so they took this golden rice and they took it to third world countries, and the kids that were suffering from vitamin A deficiency were suffering blindness. And so they genetically modified it to have more vitamin A. And guess what? They cured blindness. And so they were like, wow, this is amazing. We should genetically modify everything to make it exactly, except they didn't genetically modify things that would have mattered. They did the four core crops, right? They did soy, wheat, corn, and rice. And so if we step back and we say, okay, why would they do that? It's because it's the highest producing. And they were like, well, instead of genetically modifying it for good, let's genetically modify it so that it grows longer in colder temperatures. So they did that. And then they were like, well, now let's genetically modify it so it resists things. Because after World War II, they went from natural fertilizer to chemical fertilizer because there was so much petroleum left. And Rockefeller had so much of the stuff, he was like, well, what do I do with it? And they realized that petroleum had high nitrogen and high phosphorus, which plants love. But when you put too much on, it makes an imbalance with the microbiome. So it depletes the earth and all the things that when you manipulate something, that's what happens. So they started doing chemical fertilizer. When they started to do chemical fertilizer, they had to harvest crops quicker because they were dying faster. So they went from stone milling certain things to mechanical milling of things, such as wheat. And so you had the Green Revolution, you had the genetic modification abuse of crops for profit. Then you went to mechanical farming instead of hand harvesting or stone milling, which took nutrients away, which created higher oxidative stress from heat onto the crops due to mechanical farming and milling. So you were getting more wheat gluten out of the wheat. You were killing the enzymes in the bran, they were oxidizing. So you had like this wheat gluten product that our bodies had never seen before. And then they noticed through GMO that the plants were being attacked by pests, by bugs. And they were like, well, now we have to use an herbicide or a pesticide on it. So they used an antibiotic-based herbicide called glyphosate. And so once they started to use that, they noticed that the plants were dying. So they genetically modified the plant to resist glyphosate so that they could spray a bunch on there. It would come to season real quick. They could harvest it with their mechanical farming, and then they would feed it to us. But what they forgot to do was genetically modify us to resist it. And the pathway within the plant, when they genetically modified it, was the shikimate pathway. And that's the same pathway that's in our probiotics. So when we eat these genetically modified wheat products or plants with glyphosate, although the plant doesn't die, when we eat it, the glyphosate then destroys our shikimate pathway.
Mhm.
And second, it's a more powerful chelator than EDTA, which means that it's going to leach not only out of the ground all of your minerals, but it also leaches minerals from us. And then we don't really know the impact of long-term use of glyphosate. I mean, some studies are saying that it stays in our soils for 20 years. I mean, so now you can't grow any other type of seeds. You have to use these Monsanto seeds that they give you that are genetically modified. I mean, we have created our own agricultural prison at this point. So when I
Mhm.
look at Maha and I'm like, we're going to have to rebuild the earth for a while. We're going to have to put probiotic based soils in. We're going to have to create regenerative farming. That's going to take time because our soils are so toxic now, right? And so nutrient deficient. So glyphosate is like the icing on the massive cupcake of destruction that was in place. And glyphosate was the thing to save the destruction process. Like they were like, hey, this entire destruction process is killing crops and depleting the earth, and our crops aren't growing, and we're going to have to GMO them now, but then the bugs eat them, so we need a herbicide. Like, that's basically what happened. And I mean, you have people out there that have entire sites on the safety of glyphosate, and you know what? It's one thing. And in Roundup, glyphosate was actually taken out of Roundup because of that landmark case where the landscape
Cancer. Yeah.
cancer. But it wasn't just the glyphosate, it was the combination of glyphosate, and I can't remember the other chemical in there, that together created the carcinogenic effect. But it was the other chemical that actually has more carcinogenic impact, but that's still in there. So it's not just one thing, it's all things. It's like, McDonald's potatoes that they only use a certain type of potato, and they use a pesticide that is so incredibly toxic so that the bugs are killed that create any type of blemishes on the potato. So even if we would go to McDonald's, right, and people are going to eat, as Robert Kennedy has said, people are going to eat McDonald's, and we make them in tallow, we still have to go another step back and be like, all right, we've got to quit using this really toxic pesticide.
Yeah.
So it's just, there's so much to unravel,
Wow.
right, with this Make America Healthy Again movement. And I guess, like I said, like glyphosate for me was up here, because people always say it's not the wheat, it's the glyphosate. No, it's the wheat. It's because we're mechanically farming. It's because it's genetically modified too. So even if you took the glyphosate away, you may still have gluten intolerance because the gluten level is so high now due to mechanical farming. And then you have chemical fertilizer.
And the lack of enzymes in the body as well.
Enzymes and lack of fiber. So we have built this prison system with agriculture. It's going to take a little bit of time to get out of it, but I'm not saying glyphosate's good. It's still very harmful, but it's just one of the contributing things to our detriment. So when I taught my course on glyphosate, I taught that all the way from the Green Revolution up. And I'm like, it's not just this thing everyone's pointing at. Yes, it's a devastating thing, but it's all of these things.
Right.
So it's just something to.
So, all right. So now let's turn it around a little bit. And it's almost impossible to avoid wheat products in this country. Almost impossible. I mean, I can buy imported pasta from Italy. I can buy USDA organic bread or bread mix or whatever, but it's still almost impossible to avoid wheat and gluten. So, what do we do? Well, Tracey mentioned how the glyphosate not only pumped up the gluten but destroyed the enzymes. So to me, enzymes have to be the missing link here in what we can do to combat this onslaught, especially when you have an enzyme that has in it a particular ingredient that does address gluten sensitivity, like the DPP4 enzyme that's in Cybezyme and Probezyme. So there are things that you can and should do. I mean, what do you see? I mean, your protocols have been, groundbreaking throughout the years. But is there anybody who don't put on an enzyme?
Well, it depends. And I think everybody can benefit from enzymes. But I want to touch on what you just said with DPP4.
Okay.
And a lot of people don't realize what that is. Okay.
Okay, good.
With this entire GLP-1 craze that we're seeing out there right now, and I'm not even going to get into the for or against it, because I'm not against semaglutide. I think it's good. I think it's being abused. But DPP4 is the enzyme in the digestive system created by the L cells that extends the life of GLP-1 and GIP in the gut. That's what it does. When we look at why would we want an enzyme to extend that, GLP-1 works in the neurological, cardiovascular, metabolic pertaining to pancreatic, insulin production, glucagon production, glucose regulation. It works with pain management, cancer prevention. Okay, that's just GLP-1. GIP, glucagon inhibitory protein, is actually going to keep the blood sugar regulated. So when you have an enzyme that's going to prolong something that builds your brain, builds your cardiovascular system, builds your metabolic system, make sure that your pain regulation is good, all of that, and then you have an enzyme that helps with keeping glucose levels accountable, what does gluten then do to somebody that is low on DPP4, it creates metabolic syndrome. And
Mm.
metabolic syndrome is not just weight, right? Cancer is a metabolic disease. Cardiovascular is a metabolic disease. Diabetes is a metabolic disease. Long-term gluten exposure without regulation, right? Without good GLP-1 and GIP and DPP4 is going to create a metabolic syndrome. And that's what we're seeing. That's why our kids are being born neurologically deficit. It's why we're seeing cancer explosion. And so you're correct, Joe. Everybody should be on enzymes that have DPP4, right? So, I mean, just think about it. So the more that you understand, I mean, go back to Hippocrates, right? All health begins in the gut. Dude was right 2000 years ago or whenever that was. Like, you know, he knew, and he knew that the destruction of the human race would come with every bite we take.
Mm.
So we are looking at a revolution right now that's going to be a war on the food industry. But really, it comes down to choice. Everyone today still has a choice to eat or not eat something, you know, to buy the Fruit Loops or not, to eat the GMO glyphosate laden gluten or not. And people are like, well, if I don't eat gluten, what do I eat? Whole food, proteins, fruits, vegetables. You can live on that. You don't need bread. You don't. I'm just going to put it out. You don't need crackers. You don't need cereal. You don't need pasta. Those are luxuries.
Whoa.
Those are niceties. Joe, you're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. But like you said, you can import yours from Italy. And my guess is you probably do that because you know good quality, because you are Italian and you cook every Sunday. I know.
Yeah.
But not everybody does that. Not everybody cares. But they should. They should care. They should start to realize that our food is not what it used to be 100 years ago, even 50 years ago. And my parents say to me, well, you ate it growing up. Why does it matter? Because it's not the same.
Right.
And so, yes, enzymes with DPP4. That's why it helps with glucose regulation and gluten regulation, because DPP4, GLP-1s are going to keep inflammation down, neuroinflammation down, gastrointestinal inflammation down. DPP4 extends the life of that. You want something that's going to extend the life of GLP-1 and GIP. So that's kind of what it does.
Okay, let's go to another angle on that. Should anybody who is currently using a GLP-1, a Ozempic type drug, should they be on Sybezyme as well with the DPP4? Yes, right?
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, it would make, I mean, they'd have to use less, right? So the reason that people are being overdosed with Ozempic is because they're not doing the things that create good metabolic health in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
That would be nutrition, right? Foundational nutrition, gut health. If all health begins in the gut and GLP-1 is created in the digestive system, everybody write that down. It's created from the L cells of your digestive system. Your L cells can only produce healthy amounts of GLP-1 when there's no inflammation, when you have a good microbiome, that's good probiotic base, and the integrity of the gut is solid, no leaking. Okay? So we have all those things in place. You have good GLP-1. Okay, that's like nobody on the earth.
Right.
And so the other thing is hormone balance.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to balance the pathways that carry those. So there's 4 core things that I work on metabolic health. Now, if somebody's on Ozempic or a tirzepatide, which semaglutide is a GLP-1 activator, tirzepatide is a GLP-GIP activator. So they're a little bit different. So you have like Wegovy versus Ozempic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you're on those, you should be working on foundational nutrition, your gut health, which would involve enzymes with DPP4 to extend the life of your GLP-1, which means you could probably use less of what you're using, which would save you money and would cut down on the side effects. Because the reason that people are getting side effects from these injections is because they're being overdosed, because they have to be, because they're not doing any of the foundational stuff. They're still going out through their fast food places. And so they had to overdose them because nobody wanted to change the foundation. It was literally like the foundation in their house cracked and flooded, and they just like put up new curtains in a lot of them. And they were like, look
Mhm,
how pretty my house is.
mhm,
And so what happened was that semaglutide, that Ozempic, got really beat up. And semaglutide's been around for 50 years and has been studied in reversing renal failure, has been studied in reversing cardiovascular disease, has been studied in reversing neurological disease, has been studied in reversing neurodegenerative disease, has been studied in reversing mental health disorders. Like, it's not a bad thing, but they brought it on the market. They put it in the wrong hands of like the weight loss industry and med spas. They
mhm,
overdose people based on one study that had like 60 some participants that overdosed them. And now here we are.
mm.
So if they would do things like foundational nutrition, the enzymes, all the things, Joe, balance their hormones, rebuild pathways, they could microdose that stuff the way it's supposed to be used
Mm.
and be healthier. And so, you know, it's not a pharmaceutical. So we have to stop saying that peptides are pharmaceuticals. They're not. The powers that be don't know how to regulate them. That's why compounding pharmacies, they're pulling these from compounding pharmacies
Yeah.
because they want them. They know that they make people healthy. They know that. And they're trying to make the world think they're bad so that they can regulate them. We do not want peptides in the hands of the powers that be because they're not drugs. They're peptides. They're proteins. That's all
Mm.
they are. You know, an amino acid chain of 3 to 50 is a peptide. Anything 50 or over is a protein. Under 3 is a bioregulator. So your peptides are just broken down proteins into amino acid chains that get reconstituted and go do things in your body. Why would we want to take amino acids and hand them over to the FDA? You don't want to do that.
You know,
So
that's you just triggered something. Okay, the way my mind thinks. You know, they've been wanting to take over and control peptides for some time now.
absolutely.
So maybe this abusiveness of semaglutide was the plan
Right.
to backdoor
Right.
control of
Mhm.
peptides.
Because what's happening? They're being like, see, look how dangerous these
Wow.
are. We should regulate them. And what's happening in our industry, right?
Oh,
You have the purists over here. When I came out and I was like, hold on a second, it's not the peptide, it's the abuse of it. Everyone's like, you're injecting poison. And I'm like, wait a second, hold on. It's a peptide. Peptides are injected, some of them have to be, because they're amino acids and they break down in the gastric system. So in order to get to where they need to be, you have to inject them. Otherwise, they just break down and they're worthless, like semaglutide or tirzepatide. But if you inject them sub-Q, which is not into the bloodstream, the body then regulates them through your endocrine system, fat, and your body knows what to do with them. That's how peptides work.
mm-hmm.
So it's really the ignorant people who don't understand peptides, and the ignorant people who don't use peptides in their practice are the ones that are coming out against them because they don't understand them. They don't understand the benefit of them. They don't understand the people that actually use peptides in their practice. Watching the Ozempic thing happen, they're like, oh my gosh, they're overdosing people. These poor people, they're victims to this. They don't want that. And they never wanted that.
No.
But
No.
they were put out all of a sudden, it just hit the market. Like, where'd it come from?
Mm. I
One
know.
study.
I
Why now?
know. Well,
And
it was
then,
originally being used for diabetes, right? For
yeah, it's always been
type
used.
two.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So if you think about it, now they want to pull BPC, body protection compound. That's known as the Wolverine compound. I mean, my gosh, it's been used so safely. Like, BPC can reverse ulcerative colitis. It can reverse Crohn's. Now they want to pull it because semaglutide was abused.
Mm.
Right? I mean, insulin's a peptide,
Yeah.
glutathione's a peptide, collagen's a peptide. They're all gonna get pulled. They will all get pulled. If one peptide goes, they will try to pull all of them. And that's what I was like, wait, guys, stop. Like, some people are metabolically broken and can't produce GLP-1s right now. What if they did a little injectable semaglutide to activate GLP-1 and then we go back and we fix the nutrition in the gut and we give them a chance? One injectable peptide versus a chronic disease future with probably 14 medications. What are
Mm.
we doing? Right? So because it was an injection and people were freaked out over the word shot,
Yeah.
I mean, it just drastically took I don't know how we got on this topic, but it just got drastically got pulled to one side.
Enzymes. We started with enzymes,
Right.
DPP4.
Is semaglutide good for everyone or needed by everyone? Absolutely not. Is it needed at the dosage that it's being given out in? Absolutely not. Health is supposed to be individualized, not cookie cutter. And what you saw was a cookie cutter injection protocol launched into
Yes.
the industry by people that
Yes.
weren't qualified to do it.
Exactly.
And every
Couldn't have said it better.
physician and or peptide user was like, what just happened?
Mm-hmm.
And everyone that didn't understand peptides was like, what just happened? And there was like this huge divide. And it was just because that's what they wanted. And so if they can get the world hating peptides, they'll pull them.
Yeah, yeah, they go about it in a very underhanded and it's almost like a spy game out there with this stuff. You know, I mean, we don't know until it hits you. You don't know until it's taken away. You don't know until something happens, something catastrophic. That's the way it works. Just
Mhm.
like with let's segue then over into, since we talked about diabetes and weight loss and all that and the peptides, let's segue into cholesterol, because that's always been one of my favorite topics. And we did a two-part podcast series, and everybody, if you like to listen to it, you can just go. Tracey, what's the best way to get your two-part podcast on cholesterol?
They can go and subscribe to my podcast. It's on Spotify or Apple. It's on all the
Okay.
podcast channels.
Mhm.
And it's just called, sorry, I got to plug in my computer. I'm going to lose you, Joe. It's called Eat, Pray, Faith with
Right.
Tracey Stroup, ND. And so I think it's probably the latest episodes. It's probably like the top 3 or 4. It's in there. So
Yeah, it was really good. It was a two-part series, and it was very well explained. Both for professionals and for consumers. It's starting with what is cholesterol and why we need it, and it's not the bad guy. Up to and including the use of statins and what they've done, and it's just it's the kind of thing that more people need to learn about, because look, folks, cholesterol, it's in most circles, it's a bad word. Right? Any medical surrounding, it's a bad word. But Tracey had done some of presentations where she showed the hormone cascade in the body, and at the very top of that cascade is, guess what? Cholesterol. It's the mother hormone in our body. Without it, nothing else works properly in hormone production. Okay, so that's that. I mean, I knew that it was a big medical myth a long time ago, but when you see it like that scientifically, and then you see that picture, and then you understand why it's so important.
Right.
And so what happens when you reduce cholesterol to almost nothing, which is what they want now, right? They want you under 200, 190 total cholesterol. My God, how do you expect to make any other hormones? How do you expect to make pregnenolone or progesterone or testosterone or estrogen or D3? How do you expect to do that if you don't have the starting point?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we need to normalize higher cholesterol levels again, right? Make America love cholesterol again. It's really a difficult topic because it is the one tangible blood work test that the allopathic side has that they can prescribe a drug for and be like, oh, we want this number here. And every year it goes down. So it's normal for women in menopause to have higher cholesterol. It's normal for men over 40 to have higher cholesterol. It's normal because as we get older and our hormones change and they start to decrease, your body naturally is trying to balance. And so cholesterol needs a good phospholipid to bind with so that it can create more hormones or balance the ones that you have. If you get a head injury, it's normal to have higher cholesterol because your body's trying to regenerate your brain. So cholesterol is used for so many things. It is used to patch leaky vessels and arteries, but also leaky gut and leaky blood-brain barrier. So when you have high cholesterol, your question shouldn't be, how do I lower it? Your question should be, how do I utilize it so it can go do what it needs to do, and so it won't be high anymore? And so some of the things that I recommend, are good fats or things like phospholipid complexes, things with phosphatidylcholine, all of those good fats are just so valuable. And then making sure your hormones are balanced. One little clinical pearl for practitioners that are listening is LDL, low density lipoprotein, when it's high, is usually a good indicator that you have LPS, lipid polysaccharides, leaking out of the digestive system into the blood. LDL cholesterol has scavenger sites on it that will bind with endotoxins, those lipid polysaccharides that are floating around in the blood. So when you have leaky gut, you'll have a higher LDL. So where do you see that on the blood work? Well, you go back to your total protein and your globulin, and you look if you might have indicators there of leaky gut. And then you can be like, oh, your LDL. So sometimes people's LDL is high, and they're like, why is my LDL high? Could be that, right? So we have to look at the CMP. Could be estrogen issues, high or low. So cholesterol is an indicator of other things that your body is trying to restore or balance in the body. The question is what? And so you want to give cholesterol a best friend to go fix the issue. You don't want to annihilate cholesterol. That's like, running through a rose bush and getting 100 cuts, and you go to the hospital, and instead of, you put Band-Aids on them, and instead of them saying, oh yeah, leave the Band-Aids on, let that go, just don't run through the rose bush, they just rip the Band-Aids off and say, there you go, you're fine. It's just silly. And I don't see how we can take such a different approach on something, reading the exact same textbooks. I mean, I didn't read any different information than a medical doctor. It's just, I don't
Yeah,
know.
I love what you said on I think it was the very first one of the two podcasts where you gave the chemical uh, description or notation for cholesterol, and you said go ask your doctor if he knows what it is.
Right.
Because there's
Well,
only one. There's only one. There's not a good one. There's not a bad one. There's one.
right. It's either high or low. Now, what they are saying is you can get particle sizes of your LDL, which are stickier. But why are they stickier? What are they trying to stick to? So you always go back to the why. It's like we try to dissect the body down to these little minute analytes of the blood and try to throw that as a giant health risk over somebody. There are no studies out there that shows the correlation of decreasing cholesterol with a decrease in cardiovascular
No,
disease. That's
not
not
one.
even true.
No.
And it has nothing to do with plaquing. People are like, well, what about plaque? I'm like, different calcium, different, so different. So I just think that it's a generally accepted myth that cholesterol is bad, that you need it under a certain level. And it's why we're seeing an increase in dementia. It's why we're seeing an increase in, hormone disruption. I mean, if your cholesterol starts to rise and you're over 40, ladies, go get a hormone panel done. I'll guarantee you probably have low progesterone, or your estrogen's out of balance, or even your testosterone's low, which women don't believe. But ladies, you need testosterone too. And men, if you start getting high cholesterol and high blood pressure, go get your hormones checked, including your cortisol, and look at your adrenal function, look at your magnesium. Like, let's stop taking a pill to destroy the signals and signs that your body's trying to give to save your life. How about we stop doing that and start doing things to build your body?
Well, like you always say, the body doesn't do anything wrong.
It doesn't.
Right? It's doing it for a reason. Let me
Mhm.
ask you this real quick about that. I mean, now you mentioned all the other hormones. If someone does a D3 test and it's very, very low, would you probably see a high cholesterol?
You could, yeah, because they work in conjunction
Yeah.
together. Now, sometimes people can't convert the D because their cholesterol is off. And you may see low vitamin D with people on cholesterol meds, right? So, but
Yes.
yes, I mean, you need vitamin D for the production of cholesterol. And sometimes you'll see an elevated cholesterol when the vitamin D is lower. You'll
Mm-hmm.
also see offset hormones when vitamin D is lower, because vitamin D, as you always say, Joe, is a prohormone.
Yep.
So vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin. We know that cholesterol binds with good fats and other fat-soluble vitamins. So in that lecture I did for the blood work class, I showed the VLDL, right? The vessel, low density lipoprotein boat. Inside the boat is all your fat soluble vitamins, AEDK, cholesterol, and triglycerides. It gets thrown to the blood. Why do they all get thrown to the blood? Because they all have to combine and do something. Triglycerides is a glycerol with 3 fatty acids. That's a source of energy. Your fat soluble vitamins are going to work with the cholesterol to go do things, make hormones, fat, all that kind of stuff. So again, your body's doing everything right. So yeah, if your vitamin D levels are low, you need to get those up, and not to 30. You need levels between 50 and 80
Yes.
overall. And if
Yes.
you're fighting something chronic, you need it over 80 to the hundreds.
Yes.
This whole like, oh, you got to get your vitamin D, it's toxic. Who do you know it's ever died of vitamin D? Like nobody.
Nobody. Yes. 0.0. Our favorite number.
They have died of cancer, and they have died of COVID.
Yeah.
And they have died of things that we know with optimal vitamin D, even according to the CDC, would have saved some people.
That's right.
So
Yeah. They said, I mean, they even said that, yeah, if you're they recommended everybody on 10,000 IUs to get it up over 50, but that's a minimum. Like Tracey said, that's a minimum. You want it over 80 for optimal health. Mm-hmm. And, you know, guys, I'm looking at the clock. I mean, this is how Tracey and I used to do radio and not even know what we were going to talk about, because it's almost an hour already and we could go another hour, but we got to let her go and do some of her own work for a change. But again, go to Tracey's podcast, go to Eat, Pray, Faith with Dr. Tracey Stroup, get her podcasts, and get on and vote. Can you put that link up, Phil? Let's get on and vote for Dr. Tracey Stroup to be on Robert Kennedy's team to change health in this country. Wouldn't that be something?
Yeah, it was something that I got nominated. That was for something. I was like, what? So
screaming from the rooftops all these years has paid off.
Yeah, well, we'll see. But there's a lot of great people that were nominated as well. So if it's not me that someone votes for somebody that can really speak the truth that you want in health. You know, there's a lot of great nominees on there. So.
All right. Well, always a pleasure. Yeah, thanks, Tracey. I'm glad you came. Always a pleasure, and we'll see you next week.
All right. See you guys. Have a great show. Bye.
We will be back next hour with Dr. Maribel Verdialis on Second